Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. This video showcases a few pieces that I did for the set of tables which I've been showing you pieces of over the last several videos. But when I decided to do the tables for the gaming event I hosted a little ways back, I wanted to pick out a few special pieces that would give the tables a little bit more of a thematic element. And I had seen other people purchasing aquarium ornaments of various types, you know, at some of the GTs to adorn their boards and whatnot. And I thought this might be a nice avenue to pursue for a couple of those thematic pieces on the table. So I went out and I did some hunting, quite a bit of online searching, and found a few pieces that I think worked very well for a Warhammer table, especially if you gave them just a little bit of dressing up. So I'd like to take a moment here and showcase a few of those pieces. These are kind of one-offs. I'm not planning on doing them regularly. I mean, they could be replicated, but some of them, you know, took a little bit of time, so it'd be, you know, a sort of a special order thing that, you know, maybe only a few customers might be interested in. And also included is a modified swamp that I did for the jungle table, and since that wasn't really a regular item for the jungle terrain nor for the swamp terrain, this is kind of a sort of one-off look at the ways things could be adapted. So let's take a closer look at these pieces, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I did with them. So the first piece is the swamp that I modified for the jungle table, and this presented a couple challenges in the sense that I couldn't really emulate the height that most of the jungle pieces have on them, as I still wanted the swamp to be a playable feature, and since you can't remove individual sections, I wanted to keep the entire surface something that could accept a large movement tray. So, you know, again, my mock-up movement tray, you know, it's something that you could place troops on top of and still have it be functional. The other thing that was a bit of a challenge is that I incorporated some of these reddish pieces, and these pieces are also included in the jungle terrain I showed recently, but they're quite bright red normally, and in the jungle stands I think that kind of works a little bit better, but here it just looked too bright compared to the very muted colors that are present on the swamp. And I don't mind the swamp being a little muted, but with those red pops it was just too much. So I decided to go in and give them some heavy washes to really darken them, and actually it kind of helped to accentuate a little bit of its detail. So you could take a look there and see what I mean by darkening that, and see some of the other individual plants that I constructed to adorn that sort of carnivorous pod plant that's on a lot of the jungle pieces as well. And that gives you a little look at the other kinds of red foliage. And I think muted down like that, darkened up fairly heavily, I think that works quite well. And I really wanted to, again, you know, with all the jungle pieces, I was looking for some color, and so I wanted to give some color variation to the swamp, and these little pods, you know, kind of give a little bit of color as well as that red. It's scattered about, but I think it works pretty well. And one of the pieces that I found online was this skull cave, if you will. And I thought this would be a nice piece to include on the sort of rocky, craggy table that I sort of put together. This was actually not a bad cast per se. Sometimes these casts can be a little poor, and I'll discuss that in another piece here in a moment. But I liked the idea of having a cave on that, as the boards, when I put them together for the event, I had each of the boards with a few monsters on them that would randomly emerge from sections of terrain depending on the proximity of units and sometimes the turn number. And so this, I thought, would be a great exit to have a monster emerge from. To finish this piece, I did actually repaint it, and the color scheme is not that far off from the original color scheme, but with some of these pieces, the painting quality was quite poor, so I wanted to give it a redo just to have it have a little bit improved look. And the other thing that I did for these pieces was to go in and fill them in with some Sculptamold to really hide some of that, glaring plastic edging that you would have seen normally. Now, it's not something you'd see unless you were really looking at a model's eye view, but it was something that I wanted to make sure, no matter what angle you looked at, it at least looks somewhat natural. I thought about backfilling one of these sides, and that way it would be a true cave rather than sort of like a passageway here, but matching the sculpting technique on this was going to be pretty difficult, so I decided to skip that. The other thing I did is I went in and backfilled behind the eyes as well, so that these originally were hollow, and I didn't think that looked really appropriate for a rocky cave entrance. So I went back in and filled those in as well to give it a little bit more natural appearance. It's kind of a nice little piece, nice scale piece here, about my hand height here. So what is that? Maybe 7 inches tall, something like that. Anyway. Something that will be going out with the table that it was designed for. And the next piece you see here is a sort of, oh gosh, what did they call it? It was the serpent head. How serpentine is it? I don't know. But in any case, it got similar treatment to the Skull Mountain that I showed before. Actually, I repainted the piece, but in a very similar color scheme to the original paint job, but, again, with a little bit better quality to the painting, as the original pieces basically get a base coat and then like a single rough dry brushing or something to that effect. The piece came with these vines along the side, but it had these little sculpted leaves that looked very small and very not very high quality. So I went back in and added some vegetation to it to give it a little bit more of a matching feel to the rest of the jungle terrain. Although I think my wife said it looks like he has a little bit of hair on him. But in any case, just to tie it in with the rest of the jungle pieces. And I added some vine work along the bottom to give it a bit more of a grown-in look in the jungle, that it's being reclaimed or something of that nature. I did back the rear of the piece. This was originally an opening to the back of the piece, so I put in some cast rocks and sculpted that in to give it a little bit more of a feel. Somebody had mentioned that it almost feels like it had broken off of a larger piece, something to that idea. And then, similar to the Skull Cave, I backed it all in and then painted all that so that when you looked in, you would not see, a plastic crisp edge here and then a plastic inside. I wanted it to at least look a little natural when you got a certain angle on it. And the last thing I did was to go in, and these were originally painted gold on the piece, but they looked pretty artificial. So what I did here is I went in and gave it a wash of gold and wiped off most of the surface, with the idea being that the gold would sort of be set within the crevices of the piece, thinking that this was, gold plated, and then the gold has been wearing off through the ages, but some of the gold has been retained in some of the deepest crevices within the stonework. So that was the idea. I went with it and then gave it a little bit of, sort of an algae wash over some of the areas to kind of give it a more, like it's been in a wet environment feel. So that will be included with the jungle table. And the last piece that I added to the jungle table was this temple. This is it was labeled as a Cambodian temple, but I thought that this would be a nice focal piece for the table, something with a large line of sight blocking, a little bit bigger than the serpent head that I showed, and has some nice thematic elements. So let's go in closer on this piece because there's a bit more to talk about, and it'd be nice to see some of the details on it. So again, like the serpent head, I went back in and repainted this, again, in a fairly similar style to the original piece, the original colors on the piece, but this one had a particularly bad paint job on it when it was originally purchased. But you can see it has very similar vine work going up it. But in this instance, the piece had some roughly sculpted you can call it foliage, and it was a very interesting texture, and I really thought that that would be an area to add some better foliage to it to enhance its look. So I've gone over this with some ground super turf, and I think it really gave a very different kind of foliage look than things that I've done before. But it was probably one of the easiest ways to fill it, and I did not want to use regular clump foliage on it, as there's almost no clump foliage in the actual, growth of the jungle terrain. There are some pieces around the bases of the jungle terrain, but there's nothing substantial like this, and I didn't want it to look deciduous. So I thought that the texture of this vegetation would actually match quite a bit better to the overall jungle theme. Now this piece had some very severe mold lines and some real problems with it. You can see here there's a continuation of the mold line. This is actually the seam that the piece was cut along the mold for demolding, and it was pretty egregious. So I actually built this up quite a bit to hide most of the mold line. But in order for the time constraints to finish the entire project, I really wasn't prepared to go back in and re-sculpt all of these areas. So I just basically tried to work with the piece as it is and to hide as much of the problems with the piece as much as I could. Now, it's gotten similar washing to the serpent head to kind of match it. And along the bottom, I went in and put in a fairly heavy amount of vine work. Let me change the lighting here for a second so you can see that better. So I went in and put a fair amount of vine work along the bottom, again to match it to the serpent head, but also to hide the numerous bubbles that were at the bottom of this piece. It appears that when they were pouring it, and you can still see just a couple there, but I mean, when I say there were a lot of bubbles, there were a lot. And it appears, of course, because this is poured upside down into the mold, that either the bubbles rising to the top or because of this stepped appearance, that the the bottom of the piece really suffered the most in this casting. So what I was able to do was hide about 90% of those with vine work. And I think it made a nice, sort of way to fix it, as it really adds a lot to the piece and also conceals a large number of the flaws that were present in it. A cat hair. So there's a cat hair in every terrain order. But in any case, it gives you a sense of how I finished it and some of the issues should you try to pursue these kinds of pieces for your own tabletop. And again, for the gold work, I did something very similar to the serpent head, where I went in with some gold and then gave it a bit of a wash and then a wipe off. But this actually retained a little bit more of the gold than the serpent head, but I think it looks nice. It's not overly powerful on the piece, and kind of emulates that. It's been around for a long time, and the gold leaf or whatever was applied there has started to come off. So that is the Cambodian temple, which is included with the jungle terrain table that will be put up on the website as a single order for all of the table that was used for the event. So that gives you a look at some of the pieces that I added to the tables, and gives you an idea, particularly with the swamp, about how other pieces, in the store could be modified to fit different themes. So for instance, in the future, somebody wanted a jungle table, but they really wanted some hills, some of the new rocky hills, for instance. Those could be vined and vegetatively enhanced to match the jungle theme. So the swamp, anyway, represents how those options could be fulfilled or envisioned or created. Pick the word that fits best. And of course, these aquarium ornaments are more of a one-off piece, but they could be replicated in the future. But it also gives you an idea for the do-it-yourselfers out there about how you could enhance some of these more commercially available pieces that aren't necessarily designed for wargaming terrain. I think the real trick here is to pick things that are going to fit to scale for the games and for the tables, and there's a variety of pieces out there, but many of them are really out of scale, and so, you know, with a careful eye, you might be able to find something that would work for your own tables. So pictures of these and the tables will be up on the website by the time you probably see this video, so please feel free to drop into TerranScapes.com and check out those. And questions and comments, as I always say, are welcome down below. And I do read everyone and try to respond to as many as I can. So thank you very much for joining me. There may be a small delay after this video before the next one comes out, but probably not too long of a delay, as there's some projects that are underway that I'd like to get completed as soon as I can. So hopefully you'll come back and join me for that when that is ready as well. And until then, keep your eye on the channel for future videos.